March, the Empire's on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
Did you know that only 6 corporations control 90% of what millions of Americans see, hear, and read every single day? It's the illusion of choice. Think about it. The mainstream media is owned by only a handful of megacorporations with vested interests. But on the other hand, the internet is an interconnected network of billions of sources. So you can research information for yourself from multiple sources, or you can blindly accept what you hear or read in the mainstream media, never questioning what you are being told. This gives you a false sense of reality. I mean, do you actually know what you think you know? Or have you been programmed to accept someone else's version of events? Think about it. This is Darren McBreen, and I want you to break the matrix at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv and listen to The Alex Jones Show, because there's a war on for your mind.
Hi, I'm Alex Jones. When I got on air 20 years ago, I weighed 180 pounds. I lift weights 5 days a week. I could swim 2-3 miles. Then I discovered the New World Order, the globalists, their agenda. I started an Access television show. I was so dedicated to my work and hanging around with radio guys that I began drinking. I began smoking cigars and then even cigarettes. I transformed from looking like a white Bruce Lee to looking like a Jabba the Hutt. So I began a journey 5 years ago to shed the almost 100 pounds. I started taking Super Male Vitality and saw dramatic results in just a few weeks. When I added to the mix the key products developed by Dr. Group for InfoWarsLife.com, the results were incredible. Take the InfoWarsLife.com challenge today at InfoWarsLife.com, or give our crew a call. They can answer all your questions or tell you about any of the specials at 888-253-3139.
In the near future.
When you realize how fake it all is, the football, the basketball.
Alert. Security alert. This is Homeland Security. Analysis. InfoWars building independent media operations.
Let the worst people get controlled and tell us that we are the ones responsible.
Prime Directive. Discredit Alex Jones.
Jones is the wildly popular conspiracy theorist.
A popular conspiracy theory talk show called InfoWars.
Alex Jones is now in an Austin jail.
These people are assaulting us.
Targeting of patriots engaged.
They are never going to stop. They're never going to deviate from their program until we stop them.
Block free iPhone app at Infowars.com. Block free podcast and video feed. Imperative. Destroy Prison Planet TV.
You gotta set your eye on the enemy, not worry about what propaganda they put out. Intellectually, it's begun and you can feel it.
Crashing through the lies and disinformation. It's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're going to be talking to Anthony Gucciardi here in just a moment about what's going on with GMO. Of course, we've had victories in Vermont, where the state legislature there has a mandatory GMO labeling. You know, you have a right to know. You should be informed about what is going into your food. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of the hour, Dr. Oz came back and he said, I think the reason they came after me was because I dared to even have a discussion from one person who was in favor of GMO and another person who had criticism of it. He had an even discussion of that, but even that is not allowed. So they came after him. And of course, they are now moving to the federal level. They've come up about the time that these attacks came on him. There was also put at the in the federal government, we had legislation introduced that critics have called the DARK Act, Denying Americans the Right to Know, the DARK Act, which would basically preempt states from having the ability to do their own labeling laws. And of course, that's the status. That's the way it's been done for a very long time, where states were involved with labeling laws. But of course, issues like this Vermont legislation that would mandate GMO labeling, that would be shut down at the federal level. So instead of having to fight this at each of the individual states, they can go in and buy enough congressmen that they can shut the discussion down completely at that level. So that's what we're looking at right now. I want to get your comments on this. If you want to call in and tell us where you think this is going to go, what you think about your right to know, your right to have informed consent, we'll take your calls at 800-259-9231. And we're going to talk to Anthony Gucciardi. He'll take your comments and calls as well with me. Before I go to Anthony, I just want to let you know we have free shipping now at InfoWarsLife.com. We have free shipping on X2, on Super Mail, on Oxy Powder, and on Silver Bullet. All those products you can now get at InfoWarsLife.com with free shipping. We also have a massive sale on Silver Bullet, 50% off. We've never had this much of a discount on Silver Bullet. Right now you can save $15 per bottle, 50% off of the usual price. And of course, this is our 30 parts per million, triple the strength of many other colloidal silver products. It's heavily concentrated in pure deionized water, which is electrically stabilized. It'll improve the potency, and you can store this in your preparedness pack for years. We sell out of this frequently, but right now it is in stock, and you can also get free shipping with that, as well as 50% off and $15 per bottle off. It's a great sale right now at InfoWarsLife.com. Anthony, thank you for joining us. This is a real fight that is shaping up in terms of it's essentially a right of freedom. It's a right to not be treated like lab rats, to have human dignity and freedom to know what's in our food, know what's in our medicine, and make those choices for ourselves. And they're trying to take this away at every level right now.
Quite frankly, it's a right that Monsanto does not want you to have. We actually have proof of that from Reuters. A piece that we can pull up on screen specifically lists that 96% in a poll of Monsanto shareholders would actually vote against GMO labeling. And, you know, why do you think that is?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's because they know the public will not buy their garbage if they know what they're actually eating, if they know they're eating genetically modified organisms. So at the end of the day, we know more than 95%, and we also have those polls too, from the New York Times and MSNBC, Washington Post, Reuters, you name it, Consumer Reports, we see time and time again 95%, 98% are in support from the general public of the United States in support of GMO labeling. That's why now so many states have come, from Texas to Minnesota, now Vermont passing mandatory labeling. The Attorney General just signed off on that one. A great victory, because previously they had actually legislation for the labeling that was considered relaxed, and they gave some timetables that were a little ridiculous for companies to go ahead and label their GMOs. But now they say, nope, mandatory labeling. This scares major biotech industries like Monsanto, like DuPont, into absolutely freaking out. And that's when we have what you mentioned, the DARK Act, the Pro-GMO DARK Act, which basically disallows the labeling of GMO foods. It disallows you from knowing what you're eating.
It hides it. Yeah, exactly. It's like the Trans-Pacific, Transatlantic partnerships. They say if people knew what was in it, they wouldn't want this. And the same thing is true of your food. Why are they hiding this? That in and of itself should be a major red flag, that everything that the government is doing anymore, they're hiding what's in it, and they're holding a gun to your head saying, you have to do this because I say so, and you don't have any choice in the matter. People ought to stand up and demand to be informed, demand to have a right.
In Minnesota, so my personal favorite state right now pushing for GMO legislation, one of the first to introduce it in 2015, is Minnesota. And we now have reports from the local news that people are going to the courthouse, storming the courthouse, screaming that they want GMO labeling. The local stores, these little independent local grocery stores, are getting letters and people coming in, swarming in, saying, we want you to label your GMOs independently, slapping their own GMO labeling stickers on the food. And here this is from Minnesota, right? The most unlikely state possible. But just as we saw with Vermont, just one state pushing on the legislation, with us actually as activists and as researchers and as intellectual thinkers pushing it forward and forward and forward, we can attain the victory over Monsanto, even though they are actually the ones that falsified through a subgroup. They used an FDA quote for Prop 37, which was California's labeling initiative, that said GMOs are perfectly safe and natural, and they used the FDA logo on it.
Yeah,
and this is one of their many dirty tricks that they've used time and time again to defeat this labeling legislation, because they know that they can't actually argue the facts. That's why they have armies of trolls, as we talked about yesterday, entire departments paid to go online and discredit scientists. So as a matter of fact, they're losing the battle, and they know it, and this is just further proof with the DARK Act that we must now stop.
It's very concerning to see this. I mean, in Hawaii, this last election, they had a ballot initiative where the farmers in one area said, you're trespassing onto our organic farms, onto our heirloom products here with your genetically modified organisms, Monsanto, that you're farming. So they shut that down as part of a referendum. But now they're using a federal judge to basically overrule that. You've got movements within the states like Minnesota and Vermont. It's already passed to try to shut it down at the state level. So now what do? They take it to the Congress and try to run this act through. This is something from a Kansas Republican, Representative Mike Pompeo, who is trying to ram this through to keep this all secret because they know people don't want to see it. Don't want it. And yet we see the same thing is happening with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Transatlantic Partnership. If they can't get it shut down at the federal level, they keep going up higher and higher up the pyramid because they have to buy off fewer and fewer people if they do that. So now they're going to do it at the global level as well. We got to fight this battle at every single level.
We've heard from farmers time and time again about GMO contamination, how it's ruining their life. They're actually going bankrupt because what happens is they test all of the organic USDA organic crops and the produce and everything like that before they ship it out for market, right? So if you're an organic farmer and your next door neighbor is a Monsanto GMO farmer using Roundup and garbage like that, if some of his GMO seeds contaminate your field systems, which is very likely, in fact, I've heard reports of trucks going around with GMO seeds dousing it on the organic fields, and apparently there's video of that too that's coming out. Anyway, then they get tested and there's GMO contamination in the organic crops and it's rejected by the USDA in many cases if they're doing their job. So the independent farmer then gets rejected and has to sell either as GMO or conventional because he has a small 0.01% contamination amount in his organic crop and he's sent out of business. And then flip side, even the GMO farmers, like the ones in India, they go over in India, these independent poor farmers, and they sell them contracts with Monsanto, basically owning them in response for planting GMO seeds. And then what happens is a farmer's suicide every 30 minutes in India. Every 30 minutes, mainly, according to many reports, due to Monsanto. So they're going in, forcing them to sign their lives over, and then they're drinking the biopesticides that Monsanto supplies them, symbolically because they're financially ruined and their families leave them and they die of starvation. Their children are dying of starvation, so they kill themselves.
The same thing we see happening even with John Deere coming in and saying, you don't own your tractors anymore. That's what they're doing to the farmers in India. They come in, they hook them on this genetically modified, these crops. These guys can't make any money. They're no longer operating for themselves anymore. They no longer own anything. That's the issue. And just as we saw with these cross-contamination of crops that went before the Supreme Court, and of course the Supreme Court said, no, it's not a trespass, which is the way I would look at it. They say, no, these people are stealing the copyrighted GMO organisms from Monsanto. That's the way they did it. But of course, remember that Clarence Thomas was a former lawyer for Monsanto. We've also got the head of the FDA used to work for Monsanto. So they're very well connected, and they can spread that money around in Washington. Let's go to some of our callers. Let's talk to Ron in Vermont. Ron?
Yeah. Hi, how are you today?
Doing good.
You know, Alex Jones once said, what would it take for you to get involved in this fight? And in Vermont, that happened today. Vermont legislature is very close to passing or removing the philosophical exemption for vaccines. And the Senate approved of it 18-11, and I asked, what senators actually voted for and against it, and it was a division call, which means that it was just a nay and yay. It wasn't an individual vote, so I can't even find out who voted for it and who voted against it.
Yeah, they hide that. Let me ask you this, Ron, because I think it's very interesting. We're just talking about how Vermont became the first state to have mandatory GMO labeling. And, of course, the idea behind that is that you should know what's going into your food. And yet when it comes to vaccines, you'll see many of the people, a lot of them will be in the Democrat Party. They would fight for GMO labeling, and yet they would fight to mandate that you have no right to be informed or have consent about what goes into injections. I mean, how do you explain that kind of doublethink? Is the way I would characterize it.
I'm terrified of this because what will happen next? Will they start mandating? Once they have a mandate on vaccines, then will they say, you know what? you are these people who are mentally ill. Now we